Hey guys, Chad here with Exodus Trail Cameras. It is the beginning of July and we are just now getting serious about running trail cameras, getting our trail cameras out, trying to find some of these velvet bucks and figure out what our plan is come fall. So, any of you that have been following us, since we've started this journey know that we hunt a lot of public ground and we run a ton of cameras on public ground. And we often get the question, what do we do to prevent theft, or are we worried about theft? And of course we're worried about theft. When you're running a large number of cameras, whether it's on public or private, there's always concern that these things are going to grow legs and walk away. People call in usually a couple of times a month with stolen cameras, and they elaborate on their story saying the camera was on public ground, they had python cables, it was strapped to a tree or locked up to a tree, and they went to the camera location and the entire camera and lock was gone. So just because you have these things locked up doesn't necessarily mean that they're bulletproof. And likewise with elevated sets. Elevated sets is something that we do a lot on public ground. And it helps to get these cameras out of the line of sight of people. And obviously if they don't see them, they don't know they're there, so they can't steal them. But that does not mean that this is foolproof. Out of the 100 cameras that we run company-wide, I think in 2017, I think that we had 4 cameras stolen out of that 100. And a lot of those were elevated sets. So those are pretty good odds. And that number probably would have been a little bit lower, but 4 cameras got wiped out along the same bench or ridge system on a piece of public land in southern Ohio. So we got a pretty good track record with doing this. So there's some pros and some cons to hanging your cameras up in the air and getting them elevated to prevent theft. There's a lot of guys talking about doing it. If you search YouTube or just search the internet, you'll find a lot of information. However, there's some disadvantages that guys are not talking about. So we want to touch a little bit about that. So to get started, what you're going to need to hang your cameras in elevated sets is you're going to need some kind of climbing method. So we're using an XOP 30-inch stick. So that'll get us somewhere between 9, 10, 11, 12 feet. You really don't want to go any higher than that, because the higher you get your camera off the ground, the steeper the angle you're going to have that camera pitched down at, and it's going to eliminate a large portion of the detection area of the camera. You actually create a very big void between the base of the tree and the detection area where that camera is actually seeing or picking up. So that's one disadvantage we want to talk about. People don't necessarily always understand how these things work. If you're hanging elevated sets like on a static environment over like a scrape or a pinch point funnel, something where precisely where that deer is going to be, it's a great idea to get these things elevated and get them angled down. If you're trying to monitor a trail, it'll still work, but you really want to create some kind of pinch point where you can define where that deer is traveling to eliminate some of those dead spots in your detection area when you're elevating these cameras. So that's really the big disadvantage. It's getting your cameras, off the ground. Obviously, the advantages are if people don't see them, they can't steal them. So, like I said, we've had a pretty good track record over the last 5 years in hanging elevated sets. We do ours a little bit different. So, a lot of guys will use mounts. We don't like to use mounts for a couple of different reasons. When you're using a mount, one, on public, you're not supposed to screw anything into a tree. They make straps, a strap-on mount. But one of the disadvantages of that is you're getting the camera off the tree, and you're creating a larger side profile for that camera to actually be seen. So imagine you have a mount strapped to this tree, and the camera's actually protruding out 6-7 inches, angled down like that. So not a giant deal, but we like to keep them. We don't like to use mounts. We like to keep them tight to the tree because it slims down that side profile, and then also it eliminates, when you're using mounts, there's always a possibility of an animal, a squirrel, coon, whatever, messing with these cameras. And a lot of times with downward pressure, a lot of those mounts will cause your camera to move, pivot, and end up upside down, which none of these trail cameras are designed to be placed in the woods upside down. There's audio ports, there's your DC external power ports, there's a very high likelihood if your camera's upside down that you're gonna have moisture ingress or moisture penetration, and by the time you get back to that camera, it's probably gonna be faulty. So one, you end up with a camera that's no good, and weeks or months of data, missing data. So we like to use just very simple. We like to use paracord. We don't like to use straps. Straps just create a more noticeable something else that's visible on the tree. So we just use paracord. We'll cut 6 foot at a time or so, and use that, and we'll show you exactly how we do that. But there's just a loop tied on one end, and we'll cinch that around the tree, tighten it up. Now, a lot of you probably wondering, it's pretty hard to get paracord, stretched tight and get a knot tied into that. But you have to remember, because we're not using a mount, the likelihood of us getting that camera pitched down without having anything behind it is pretty low. So a lot of times we'll use a stick, get this camera strapped on, and then we'll use a stick. Depending on how far we want to get that thing angled down, we'll use a bigger or smaller stick, or wedge it further down on the camera body. So pretty simple, pretty darn effective with what we do. We've seen great success with it. And if it's not broke, don't fix it. So we're going to go ahead and get this thing set up. We're going to use this tree for demonstration purposes. It's a maple tree. We got some branches and whatnot, but we'll throw our stick up and get this bad boy hung. So I don't go too crazy with my stick height here. I usually keep my bottom step about the middle of my thigh, and that puts that top step on a 30-inch stick, just about the same height as my face, which is about 5 foot, and I'm about 6 foot tall, so that'll get me about 10 foot. So we have our stick mounted onto the tree. I'm not wearing a climbing harness. We probably recommend for folks to wear a harness and a linesman's belt. That way your hands are free. You're not hanging onto a camera and climbing a tree with one arm. I feel pretty agile, and I've never had a problem with it. But I always tie the camera around my waist, simple square knot, so it's easy to get to, just off to the side, and then go up. So with both hands free, and get myself secured off to the tree. Undo my knot. And then I'm good to go. So with that loop already tied into that paracord, I'm able to run the tail end through that loop and really pull it fairly tight enough where I just have a little bit of slack to get this thing angled down. And I'm just going to loop this back around and get it tied off here. Now, when you first get your camera tied up, you're probably just going to want to tie a loose knot. You're not going to want to tie like a knife knot or something that you're not going to be able to get untied, because you may need to do a little bit of adjustment. So I have the camera mounted here, have the stick in my pocket, and I'm just going to wedge this stick down on the top of that camera to get it angled down, about like that. So one of the things that we haven't mentioned yet is setting these cameras up, elevated sets with a 2-inch viewing screen, or any kind of viewing screen where you can actually see exactly what the camera is seeing, what the field of view is, and whether or not you think your dead spot underneath that camera is too big. So that's about dead nuts right where we want it. So we're going to turn this thing on and walk away. Well, guys, that's a wrap on how to hang elevated sets to deter theft. This is a extremely effective way to run cameras in static environments, whether that's on public or private. And when we talk static sets, those are areas like a scrape, where you can know the approximate distance and area that deer is going to be kind of isolated, and you're going to spend a lot of amount of time there. So when you're walking through a piece of public and you see a fresh scrape, a lot of times guys are going to start looking for cameras. It's an obvious place where people hang cameras. So on public, a scrape is an excellent way, or is an excellent area to, if you want to monitor that, to get your cameras up off the ground, out of the line of sight of people. And it's the same with private. So bait stations, feeders, mineral sites, scrapes, property corners, areas where where people aren't supposed to be. But if a trespasser's there on private and they know they're not supposed to be there, and they come across a camera and their picture's taken, they have just a few choices. They can get caught, they can steal your SD card, or walk away with your camera. So 2 of the 3 are not very good, and typically that's why we see cameras on private being stolen. So that's a wrap, guys. If you guys find any value in what we're talking about, any of the videos, interviews that we're doing, please comment, please like this video, and smash that subscribe button for us.